So, the next part I want to talk about is how do we keep that amygdala from triggering, and how do we engage that prefrontal cortex? I want to share with you another concept by a lady named Kim Scott, who is a senior executive at Google. And she has a very, very simple, I would say, way of explaining the best way to give feedback. And it ties and it relates very much to this concept of care. So we have a video that we're going to share here. We'll share it up on the monitor as well. It's a couple of minutes long, so please, hopefully everyone can have a chance to listen through it. But she shares a story of an interaction with her and Sheryl Sandberg, who is now the COO of Facebook, but she was her boss. And what she's sharing there is she had this presentation in front of the entire Google. So she was a senior executive at Google, and she was leading up their AdSense division. And Sheryl Sandberg was her boss. She was making a presentation to all of these senior executives at Google, and it was going, like the AdSense business was going phenomenally well.
Correct.
And this is quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
So now it like rules the world. But AdSense is the thing where if you're at Amazon shopping for a vacuum cleaner, now every time you go to any news website, you have vacuum cleaners hunting you down.
Yeah.
That's all her. That's all AdSense. So the business was going fantastic. And after the presentation, she had sharing all of these numbers, how they were doing great, and she's walking with Sheryl and asking for feedback. And Sheryl says, that was a great job. You did a fantastic presentation, a whole bunch of other good stuff. And then she has a but I want to share some feedback with you. And I had alluded to this earlier as well. Her feedback was, by the way, you say a lot. And Kim hears this and says, wow, talk about throwing a cold, wet blanket on my, on top of the world. And she's like, okay, yeah, I say no big deal. And she keeps trying to talk about all of her victories. And Sheryl stops her again and says, no, Kim, I don't think you're hearing me. You say a lot, and you should work on it. I think she kind of maybe even tries to get rid of her again or go down a different topic path. She finally says, Kim, okay, I feel like you're not getting what I'm trying to get to you. So I didn't want to put it this way, but what I'm trying to tell you is when you say it kind of makes you sound stupid. So you want to talk about a big burst of her bubble, and she immediately, as you and I would be the exact same, her amygdala fired off.
Yeah.
It's her boss, so she's not immediately going to punch her in the face or scream at her or anything like that. But internally, her amygdala fired off, and she just was, what is she doing? She's like totally squashing on my parade. She's creating this unnecessary big deal out of an like,
yeah, exactly.
So who cares about my ums? I just ruled the entire meeting. And so she has an opportunity to kind of simmer on this a little bit, and later on, as she's simmering on it still, she starts kind of coming out of that amygdala response, and her prefrontal cortex starts putting together the logic of this entire storyline to her. And what she starts realizing is Sheryl Sandberg has been nothing but a promoter of Kim ever since she joined the company. She had always invited her to book clubs, gone out of her way to give her opportunity.
Yeah.
The chances that Sheryl Sandberg was telling her she says just to razz her or make her feel small was absolutely impossible. The only reasonable explanation was she actually thought that she was saying too much, and it took away from the quality of her presentation, and she wanted to help make her better. So that's now her prefrontal cortex saying, I'm going to fill the gap with trust here now. And the reason why she filled the gap with trust is because she connected the dots of their relationship and knew that Sheryl Sandberg cared for her.
Correct.
So it's from this construct of having this critical feedback, but also knowing that the person cares about you, where she was able to have the most useful relationship with that feedback.
Yeah, and I would also add that it's one, you mentioned the relationship and how they got to their relationship and being an advocate and a promoter and all of this stuff. But it's also, I would say, how she delivered the feedback and where she delivered the feedback. Right? If she delivered that feedback in front of everybody or as a question or whatever the case may be, that would have thrown her completely the other way and maybe not have allowed her to get to the point where it's like, wait, this was good feedback. And in the position of care, it was like, no, your results speak for themselves. All of this is great. I want you to be even better, and I think this could help you.
This is how you're going to get to the next level. You're so good in so many other things, and there's this. It's a shame that this little thing is potentially holding you back. And you're right. She waited for an opportunity when there was no other audience. So she's not doing this to rub her face in it in front of other people.
Correct.
There's no other people.
Yeah.
So that shows that she took that additional level of care. And Kim's kind of reflection after the fact was, this was actually the most generous, most kind thing that she could have done for me after that meeting. You know, I would have loved to have only gotten pats on the back. And I would have loved to have just been a pure 100% fan of my performance. But the reality is, I would have kept saying And I would have never known that it's just a little chink in my armor that I could have still addressed. And she said, you know what? I went out and I got that speech therapist, and I don't say as much anymore. Now, maybe I still say it a little bit, but
she's
but I don't
conscious
say it
of it.
And so I've now taken myself up another level because of radical candor.
Which is great. That's awesome.
Which is great.
And the video, they should all check out the video. We'll make sure we linked, Tyler will link to the video in the show notes too, so you can have quick access to that.
Yeah, video is incredibly powerful. I mean, and I took a little bit of a snippet that we'll put it in the linked video, just a couple of minutes, but please do listen to the entire thing because there's a whole bunch of other stories of how powerful this is. So Kim Scott then created an entire business around this.
It's amazing.
Entire business around this because
from one piece of feedback.
Because and I think that may have been the awakening moment.
Correct.
And then once you get the awakening moment, you start realizing there's feedback around us all the time. You know, I mean, frankly, not that far off from Dalio. I mean, Dalio's saying the same thing. There's feedback to be found in every meeting, in every interaction. Now, it's a little bit harsh for after every single sentence we share with each other, we give each other the impression of what we,
exactly.
It's like, Anthony, you're losing eye contact, you know what I mean? Or smile more, or whatever. So that might be a little bit too much, and the dot connector is a lot. But Kim Scott is talking more about personal relationships between people, one-on-one feedback, not for public consumption, not in the meeting with the Google execs, but during the walk afterwards.
Correct.
But that's, that takes time, it takes energy, it takes effort. And so you got to be conscious of it, and it's got to be a priority, and you got to be intentional. And that's why she's created this grid of, and specifically, not to spend too much time on this, but she touches on it in that video, all of these different aspects or all of these quadrants. But radical candor is this top right quadrant where it's the combination or the intersection of not only challenging them directly, meaning radical candor, honest feedback, but what makes it radical candor as opposed to obnoxious aggression is you being able to connect the dots in your head, not dot connector.
Yeah, exactly.
But allowing your prefrontal cortex to connect the dots as to, okay, why would I be getting this feedback? Let's assume that it's coming from a good place. If you assume that it's coming from a caring place, then you have a higher likelihood of actually hearing it, listening to it, acting on it. Because if we continue to live in a world where we aren't operating up here, there is so much trapped in our mind that we know about our peers, our loved ones, that we are not sharing with them purely because it's either inconvenient or we don't have the skills to be able to deliver it in a way that's going to get received.
Yeah, and I love the concept, how she delivers it. I think it's in the book, but it's challenge directly while caring personally.
That's right.
And that just, I think that resonates with a majority of people. They understand that, and they understand the benefits of that. And if it's rooted in the care, they can actually make improvements.
That's right. And I think this is the sort of thing now where we have the work culture. I think we were talking about this earlier. The work culture is shifting. The world, 20, 25 years ago when I started my professional career, people didn't share this sort of stuff with each other. You would get one annual review, and in that annual review, you'd only get the feedback of your one supervisor.
Correct.
Who maybe worked with you a lot or maybe didn't work with you a lot, but had a very, very kind of specific view of your interactions. And that feedback was few and far between, and definitely not something. It was actionable feedback, and generally, you would get some goals out of it, but it didn't satisfy the need to improve on the pace that I wanted to improve on. That culture is shifting, and as I said, whether it's a generational shift that's happening, but people are looking for more and more feedback on a more regular basis, whether it be through one-on-ones or quarterly one-on-ones or monthly one-on-ones, rather than just the annual review. So for us, when we went down the road of creating 360score.me, that was a big part of it. We wanted to make it easier for people to share radical candor with each other. Because in organizations now, if the organization itself is not creating a mechanism for people to be able to share their truth with each other. And I'm not talking about the dot connector where it's in public without anonymity and that gets a little bit too dicey. But just even in an anonymous system, if companies don't provide that, we're having individuals come to us and say, even though my company's not ready for this, I want to get feedback from my coworkers.
Exactly.
Can I use the tool just to get feedback from them because I want to know how I can get better? And these are people that are telling me they obviously have an amygdala, but they know how to keep it in control. And they know that this exercise, this feedback exercise, is not about ego. It's not about shame. It's about data. And if I can see this as data, I can process it literally like a computer without firing off emotions.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm going to be the best version of myself.
And we've talked about this too internally, like where in a sales-driven role or even a marketing data-driven role, it's very clear. I put in this amount of dollars into Google paid advertising, I got this return. That's either good or it's bad. It's a very quick result that you can see on a weekly, monthly basis, right? Same with sales. But for people that aren't in those types of professions, to understand how you're doing throughout the course of the year, like, hey, we have these big strategic goals. Am I, as an individual contributor, actually helping us getting there? Am I doing something that's holding us back? People want to know, is that the case?
Absolutely. And, as we had talked about before, people have this opinion in their head already.
Correct.
It's not a lot of times. Sometimes people, when they see this feedback, or even if they see the dot connector, or if they see a grading scale of other individuals, it's intimidating because you're coming from a world where we don't have a lot of this data. We have data all the time now as to where to go have the best pizza in town, or the best hotel in town, or even what vacuum cleaner to buy on Amazon.
Yeah.
But as far as the people that you work with and the interactions that you have with each other, we don't share a lot of data with each other. And yes, you may have gotten it from your boss, and you may informally get it from your coworkers, but unless you're intentional about it, a lot of that data doesn't get out there. And so we want to do two things at the same time. We want to ratchet up the volume of data that we can get. But then at the same time, we got to care for the individuals and the people to make sure that when they get this data, they are in the best possible way to receive it. So a couple of examples of ways that we coach folks, because you had mentioned this earlier. This is an organization needs to be ready for this. And a big part of what we do is not just give them a tool to be able to share feedback with each other, but is coach them on the best ways to be able to handle it. So part of the coaching is about talking about how to receive it well. And that's talking about the amygdala in particular.
Correct,
and how to control it. And a big part of it is people just understanding that they don't have to feel guilty about having an amygdala. It's built into you.
Yeah.
It's natural. Getting angry or feeling insecure is completely natural. It's just at some point, and hopefully it's not, a month, but it can be minutes, it can be hours, it might even be a day. At some point, you need to be able to control yourself. We were doing this presentation not too long ago to a group of HR execs.
Yeah.
And there was this one person in the room who raised, and she seemed very agitated. Still agitated about something, and we thought it was maybe she's agitated about us saying radical candor is a good thing. She just said, well, what about this? Sometimes when you get feedback, sometimes it's just wrong. And what do you do about that? What do you do about it when feedback's wrong? I had this one boss that brought up something that she didn't want to share what it was, but that brought up something, and it was a nitpick. It was an absolute nitpick, and it was just making a big thing out of nothing. So, let's put to the side real quick about what the content of that nitpick may have been. But how, when she was bringing this up, her amygdala is still firing off.
Yeah, clearly it was really firing off when she got it.
Really firing off. So, is there a possibility that this boss was just a complete jerk and was picking on her and nitpicking? Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Now, if she fills the gap with that answer, is she going to get better?
No. Absolutely
no
not.
chance.
Yeah.
Absolutely no chance. However, it is true. It is possible that it was a nitpick, but the reality is, at least in one person's eye, in this universe, whether that person's right or wrong,
Yep.
in one person's eye, they thought that she needed to improve in a certain area. That person happened to be their boss. So, improving that one area, whether it's a nitpick or not, in her boss's eyes, is that going to do well for her?
No, absolutely not.
Well, improving that area.
Definitely.
Improving, even if it's a nitpick, if she got better in that area, at least this boss is going to look at her more favorably.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. And I always like to go to this path. If one person's thinking it and was willing to share it with you, that took some courage from them to do that.
Yeah.
Especially if it's on a one-on-one conversation like that. It took some courage to do that.
See, I know you're in a good place because that's how you're seeing it. Believe me, I don't think she saw it as a courageous moment on that boss's part.
And then exactly, and I could see that as well. And then getting to the point where if I always say the way I try and process it is if one person thinks this way, there's the potential that a few others do at a minimum.
That's right.
Right? They were just the person that was able to share it with me, and therefore I need to look at it in this holistic approach.
That's right. And and so you're absolutely right. The odds of one person mentioning it to you, and that's the only person who has ever thought this about you, is very, very remote.
Yeah.
I mean, once again, it's possible that maybe they're just the bad guy and everyone else sees you in a different way. But even that one person, if they are your boss, the reality is their opinion of you matters. You getting promoted or not getting promoted, okay, fine, you can quit, and go somewhere else.
Exactly.
But assuming
maybe it happens again.
Yeah. By the way, it sounded like she was still at the same job. So the reality is, whether it's a nitpick or not, reputation is what other people think of you. Period.
Yep.
So if it's a nitpick or it's not, you may think the whole world nitpicks about you, but it's what they think about you. You don't get to debate it.
Yeah.
And so you get to decide one thing and one thing alone, and that is, am I going to try to get better at this or am I not? And if you want to try to get better at it, you have to be able to receive it in a way that is going to allow you to focus on it in a productive manner.
Yeah.
And she obviously, did not receive it in a productive way, but we want to increase that likelihood.
And talk to us about, say, the sandwiching concept that you have, and how, in this specific example, the boss may be been able to use this concept of sandwiching to maybe let it sink in further with her.
That's right. And so sandwiching is really, it comes back to care. Yeah. It's showing the other individual that this isn't just about me throwing grenades at you, just to get off on making you feel less. But I'm showing you that I'm seeing things that I appreciate in you, along with things that you need to perhaps improve upon. And so it's balancing that. And it takes time. And we remind people to be in that radical candor quadrant. It takes time, but it's worth the time. because the likelihood of your feedback actually resonating and registering is so much greater. If you don't spend the time to show that, you're still going to be telling them the truth, but there's the likelihood of that they're going to see it as obnoxious aggression, which is the bottom right quadrant, is much higher.
Yeah.
And that's going to take away from the effectiveness. And so we want to make sure that people understand, it may be tempting to just blurt things out and tell people the truth.
Yeah.
And yes, in the dot connector world, there's no sandwiching generally. It's a red two.
Quick.
It's a quick.
Yeah.
But in most interpersonal relationships, if you care about that individual, you want them to be successful going forward, you can't just give them the data without taking care of the individual.
Correct. And I always tell the team members too, that if you only see that negative piece or a constructive area where they can improve, you're not looking hard enough for the good stuff that they're doing. Or that good stuff they're doing, you're just taking as a grain of salt and throwing out real quick and only looking at this thing. So there's a need as the person providing the feedback to take the time to say, wait a second, here's what you did great.
That's right.
Here's where you can improve.
And it takes work.
It does.
It takes patience.
You can't be lazy.
But if you're not going to take that patience, then yeah, you are, let's just say not being the kindest coworker or
Exactly.
or boss or whatever role you might be. But the key thing here is to also know that this data is coming at you from everywhere. Wisdom is not trapped in bosses' heads, not by a long shot.
Yeah.
Bosses generally will have more experience, perhaps. Maybe they've understand the organization better. So I'm sure they have some wisdom. But there is wisdom that is coming in absolutely every single direction. And so a lot of the times, seniority, especially in the traditional reporting structure, annual review methods, seniority is really what dictated who were teachers and who were students. In an ideal world, the reality is that we're all teaching each other, maybe to different degrees, all the time potentially. Meaning we have feedback to share. So I can tell you from my seat in some of the organizations that I've been in, it's a very dangerous seat because I'm near or at the top of the org chart, and so purely because of that seniority, sometimes there's an intimidation factor for people to think that they can teach me something.
Correct.
That they can give me radical candor. And so it becomes very dangerous because then I only listen to my own ideas. And there is not a lot of wisdom if I'm the only person that I get access to.
Exactly.
And so that's why the 360-degree review process that we use in 360score.me is so important, because especially for folks at the upper parts of an org chart, they may sometimes be in ivory towers, unintentionally, intentionally,
Correct.
whatever. I used to always say I had an open door policy.
Yeah,
and I did. Literally, I try to keep the door open, but that doesn't mean that people feel comfortable sharing that with you.
Yeah.
So here's some feedback, for example, that we've gotten through 360score.me. Sometimes gives the impression that decisions have been made and meeting is just needed to make them official. Point to improve on is continually know when to step back and observe, so on and so forth. It can be disconnected from the day-to-day. Look at this. This is another piece of feedback that was received through 364. You want to talk about care? Either somebody hates you or loves you.
Yeah, exactly.
If they're going to spend this much time giving you feedback. So, when in meetings, it can be difficult to get a word in. He makes his thoughts known, speaks for a good while, sometimes conveys his thoughts as rules, tends to start talking immediately after someone finishes talking, can come across as him trying to cut that person off, more effective to try one thing at a time. So all of this feedback, this is feedback I got.
Yeah. Wow.
This is feedback that I got. And here's some additional feedback that was positive to say, I'm glad that he's working on these issues. Rashad has done a great job of kind of taking some of the previous feedback. I'm glad to see he's working on these issues. But I got this one just like last week still. So, I can talk about feedback and wanting to take and learn from it and improve on it, but it's always a work in progress. And there is so much data that is tied in people's heads. And I can discount this and say, these ungrateful staff people, what do they think? They don't know what but where am I going to get with that?
Nowhere. Absolutely nowhere.
All I'm going to do is agitate myself and not address, this is my reputation. Period. What I think of myself, all of my counter arguments as to why they're wrong or why I'm right,
correct.
That's all my ego.
Yep.
All of these individual data points are my reputation that is in people's heads. It's just now I got the gift that I see into it. And I now get to decide whether I'm going to do something about it or not. And more often than not, it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
It's something I want to get better on. And that's really, I think this is the world that we're getting in. We're getting to a more transparent world. As I said before, you know the quality of hotels, you know the quality of the ingredients in every single thing you eat, in the coffee, how many calories, how many protein. If you are going for a new job, you go to Glassdoor and you see their reputation in the marketplace. This is just the next piece, which is let's talk to each other honestly, to the people that are the most important to us. Now, I'm not saying that we do this at the family level yet and stuff, but who knows? Maybe it goes down that road. But at least to the people that we count on the most in a work environment, let's speak honestly with each other. Let's learn from Kim Scott. Let's learn from Ray Dalio. But let's do it in a way that treats everyone as a human. That's not some sort of scorched earth. Because we all know those people historically that we would always say had no filter.
Correct.
Yeah.
If
you were putting on some pounds, they'd always tell you.
Exactly.
If you were losing your hair,
I hear about it.
you hear about it. And so we would always, say, well, they don't have a good filter. There's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
But what we're basically saying is they were giving us a lot of feedback, but it was coming across as obnoxious and aggressive because they just didn't know, they didn't have the EQ to know when to stop sharing. Yeah. But that's all useful data, and we just need to be able to share it with each other in a way that shows each other that we care. And if we do that, not only are we going to get better performance, to get back to the topic of the entire conversation, to have a performance-focused culture, by all means, have transparency so people know where they stand with each other in the company. But then also to make sure that we treat each other all as humans. And that's, I think, how we're going to engage each other and remain focused on performance, but also not miserable and paranoid and things along those lines.
I think the most important point there is that when you said you get to decide as the individual what you're going to do with that data, with that feedback. And it's up to you at that point. And maybe you should sit on it for an hour. Maybe you should sit on it for a day. Maybe it's a week. We don't know. But you should take that data. They took the time to give it to you. You should take the time to understand it. And it's up to you to do what you want to do with it.
You get to decide whether you want to get better or whether you want to get angry.
Yeah. So, this has been great. We have anything else left on here, or? That is it. So perfect timing. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been great. I know we have some follow-up episodes that we're going to keep expanding on this topic, because just like when Ray Dalio came out with principles and how he was doing in his organization, I think it took the world by storm in the sense of nobody had heard of this before. Right. I think there's a lot of education that you and 360score.me can be doing to help companies that are smaller scales than most of these understand how to get the best out of their people, how to drive performance, how to, at the end of the day, if everybody's doing this correctly and everybody's bought into it, the culture's going to go through the roof.
Oh, absolutely.
Because everybody's now like, all right, I know where I stand, I know where I can get better.
And you're going to retain the best and brightest, the performers that are also invested in each other. Because when somebody is providing that sort of feedback to each other, especially those substantive feedback comments, you're now invested in that person. You're their coach.
Yeah.
And you're a potential coach of everyone. And there's nothing cooler than sticking around as a coach to see, how that player is improving over time.
Exactly.
And just creates a much more engaging environment.
Love it. Thank you, everybody. Rashad Bajwa, President and CEO of 360score.me. We'll make sure we link to everything that was discussed, including the different books, as well as 360score.me, where you can check out the product. I think you can do it. You can do a demo now. You can sign up for a demo. You'll probably get contacted by Mr. Raj Patel, who we have in the room with us as well, and definitely look out for that. And we'll continue to educate the audience as we go forward here. Thank you, Rashad.
Thank you, sir.